What if Naruto traveled to Hunter x Hunter universe? Part 8. Leaving the safety of Macedora behind, the group marched due north. Within hours, the lush wilderness turned barren, replaced by a jagged, ash-choked wasteland. Ahead of them rose the northern volcanic range, a jagged spine of black stone and bleeding magma vents that cut into the heavy sulfur clouds. Man, talk about a hostile neighborhood, Naruto muttered, adjusting his collar to block out the rising heat. Reminds me of the training grounds back home, only with way worse air conditioning. Keep your guard up, Kahlua warned, his eyes scanning the narrow obsidian ridge they were traversing. According to the map, this is the searing threshold. The environmental hazards here aren't just natural. They're amplified by the game's background Nen rules to keep out low-level players. As if on cue, the ground beneath them gave a violent, sickening lurch. Rumble! A massive fissure snapped open along the ridge, completely cutting off their path. But it wasn't just magma that welled up from the crack. The heat waves warping the air suddenly condensed into a localized disaster. Hazard, sulfur vortex. A towering cyclone of superheated volcanic ash and concentrated, toxic sulfur gas erupted directly in front of them, spinning at blinding speeds. The air pressure plummeted instantly, making it nearly impossible to breathe, while the intense heat threatened to singe their clothes off before they could even move. "It's too wide to jump," Gon shouted over the roaring wind, shielding his eyes from the stinging ash. "And the gas is toxic. If we breathe it in, we'll pass out in seconds." Tisk, what a pain, Naruto sighed, his shoulders slouching for a brief second in pure Shikamaru-style annoyance. "Seriously, can't we just get a straight path for once? Alright, boys, listen up. We're going to have to combine our tricks to bust through this wall." "What's the plan, Captain?" Kahlua asked, a confident smirk breaking through his cautious stance. "We need a tunnel through the storm," Naruto said, his eyes sharpening as he snapped out of his lazy posture. "Kahlua, you're the catalyst. Gon, you're the drill. I'll handle the containment." The combined strike, breaking the vortex 1. Step 1. Lightning grid. Ionize the air. Kahlua leapt forward, his body flickering with his internalized, silent lightning. Instead of a loud blast, he projected a fine, high-frequency mesh of pure electric aura directly into the front of the cyclone. The electrical current rapidly ionized the swirling ash particles, forcing them to clump together and slowing the vortex's chaotic speed. 2. Step 2. Wind-style barrier. Anchor the storm. Naruto materialized right beside Kahlua. Raising his left hand, he drew upon his baseline natural energy, throwing out a massive, pressurized wall of spinning wind aura counter to the cyclone's rotation. This acted as a massive, invisible shell, pinning the toxic sulfur gas into a tight, localized column so it couldn't bleed out and suffocate them. 3. Step 3. Compressed Jajanken, the kinetic drill. With the storm stabilized and slowed, Gon used the opening. He vaulted off Naruto's shoulder, his right fist already humming with the hyper-compressed, water balloon rotation of his new Jajanken. He drove his fist straight into the heart of the stabilized vortex. Jan Ken Rock. Boom! The impact of Gon's hyper-dense enhancer strike, combined with the conflicting rotational forces Naruto had anchored, caused the sulfur vortex to literally implode. The kinetic shockwave shattered the cyclone into a harmless cloud of cold, inert dust, blowing a perfectly clean, safe tunnel straight through the volcanic barrier. Gon landed lightly on the other side of the ridge, his fist smoking slightly but completely unharmed. He turned back, grinning brightly. "We did it. It completely dispersed." "Nice timing, Gon," Kahlua said, dropping down beside him as his lightning aura receded. He glanced over at Naruto, who was casually strolling through the cleared path, hands tucked back into his pockets. "And your wind wall kept the gas from poisoning us. Not a bad strategy for a guy who complains so much. Hey, the faster we clear these annoyances, the sooner we get to the real fight," Naruto laughed, slinging his arm around Gon's shoulder. From the rear, Biscuit walked through the newly opened path, her arms crossed and a look of profound satisfaction on her face. Perfect synchronization. They didn't just use brute force. They used shape manipulation, electrical conductivity, and kinetic compression to rewrite the environment. These boys are evolving past the game's design. As they stepped past the ridge, the jagged volcanic peaks finally gave way to a massive, hidden valley. At the far end, nestled right against a sea of boiling magma, stood a towering, ancient stone fortress. Naruto's glitched binder let out a sharp, resonant chime, the screen flashing a brilliant, steady gold. Target reached. The creator's sanctum. Well, Naruto smirked, his eyes locking onto the fortress gates. Looks like we found the landlords. Let's go see what kind of game they're running, believe it. From the moment we crested the ridge, my skin was prickling. It wasn't just the ambient heat from the magma veins bleeding down the rock face, or the suffocating stench of sulfur thick enough to coat the back of my throat. It was something else, an instinct drilled into me from the nursery chambers of Kukuru Mountain, screaming that we had just stepped onto a hyper-lethal playing field. Ahead of us stood the creator's sanctum. It wasn't a digital rendering, it was a towering, brutalist monolith of solid black obsidian, practically humming with a dense, pressurized layer of nen that made the air feel heavy as lead. This is it, I thought, my eyes darting across the perimeter, scanning for structural blind spots. The place where Jing Free-CSS and his inner circle threw down the anchor for this entire island. Man, talk about a serious lack of curb appeal, Naruto grumbled from beside me. He had his hands tucked into his pockets, his posture slouched in that lazy, troublesome classic stance he'd been slipping into lately. But I wasn't fooled. My eyes caught the slight, rhythmic twitch of his fingers. He was drawing in natural energy, mapping the entire valley without moving a muscle. "They're waiting for us," Gon said. His voice didn't shake. He was vibrating, his golden enhancer aura flaring up in brief, excited sparks around his boots. Suddenly, the massive obsidian gates didn't swing open. They literally shattered into a swarm of razor-sharp, floating black shards. Out of the dust walked a single figure. He didn't look like Genthru or any of the desperate players we'd encountered. He wore a simple sleeveless tunic, his arms covered in intricate, glowing red tattoos that mirrored the code lines in Naruto's glitched book. The air around him didn't just warp, it snapped. "I am Razor," the man said, his voice dropping like a physical weight into the valley. "Guard of the northernmost horizon. If you want the final pieces of the registry, you don't use cards. You survive me." Before the last word even left his mouth, my assassin instincts triggered a code red override. "Move." Razor's hand blurred. He didn't summon a weapon. He just condensed a massive, terrifying sphere of pure, unadulterated nen emissions into his palm, a ball of raw, crimson energy that looked like a localized sun. With the casual grace of a professional pitcher, he whipped it straight at Gon's head. The speed was psychotic. It crossed the 100-yard gap in a microsecond, tearing a deep, smoking trench into the solid stone floor. Too fast for Gon to dodge, my brain calculated instantly. But I didn't hesitate. I threw myself into full internal overdrive. The silent, high-voltage currents I'd locked inside my nervous system detonated. My reflexes bypassed my conscious thought, shifting me into Godspeed mode. The world slowed to an absolute crawl. The crimson nen ball was a spinning, roaring meteor inches from Gon's nose. I blurred into the space between them, my hands stiffened into hardened claws. I didn't try to block it head-on, that would shatter my arms. Instead, I channeled a high-frequency, counter-rotating electric current through my palms, striking the side of the nen sphere at an exact 45-degree angle to redirect its kinetic trajectory. Z's crack. The lightning-infused friction screamed against Razor's emission. My muscles tore under the sheer, violent mass of his aura, but the redirection worked. The crimson meteor veered off course, violently blasting into the canyon wall behind us and vaporizing a massive chunk of the cliffside in a blinding explosion. I skidded backward across the cracked stone, my boots smoking, blood leaking from a small tear on my forearm. I smirked, wiping it away with the back of my hand. "Not bad, but you're going to have to throw faster than that. Kahlua," Gon shouted, instantly dropping into his low, aggressive stance, his right fist already humming like a jet engine as the water balloon rotation kicked into hyperdrive. "Don't rush him alone, Gon." Naruto's voice cut through the smoke. The lazy slouch was completely gone. He stepped up beside us, his blue eyes burning with an icy, battle-hardened glare as his glitched binder materialized, the screen violently flashing gold as it began to siphon the ambient nen leaking from Razor's explosive attack. Razor looked at the three of us, a slow, dangerous smile spreading across his face as the tattoos on his arms glowed brighter. An assassin who commands lightning, an enhancer who masters internal rotation, and a boy who doesn't belong to this world's rules. Come then. My heart hammered against my ribs, not out of fear, but pure, unadulterated adrenaline. This wasn't a game anymore. This was a real war. The brief, blinding instant of Killua's lightning reflex settled back into the heavy reality of the volcanic valley. The dust from the shattered cliffside rained down as the perspective shifted, capturing all four figures frozen in the tense, smoking arena. Razor stood unimpressed by the redirection, his hands resting casually on his hips. The massive, crimson nen aura rolling off his shoulders didn't waver for a second. Impressive speed, boy, but you won't be able to redirect a dozen of those at once. With a sudden, violent surge of his aura, Razor's shadow stretched out across the obsidian floor. The dark energy split, morphing and rising into solid, towering figures. One by one, his legendary 14 devils materialized, hulking nen beasts with blank, faceless masks, each emitting a pressurized weight that rivaled mid-tier hunters. "They're a collective emission system," Killua called out, his voice sharp as he dropped back into a defensive stance alongside Naruto and Gon. "The numbers on their shirts. They can merge their power or split it up to confuse our tracking. Don't let them circle us." "Man, talk about a crowded room," Naruto muttered. He didn't slouch this time, but he let out a short, sharp breath, his fingers tightening. "All right, if he wants to play numbers, we can do that too. But I'm tired of playing defense. Gon, Killua, prepare the center lane." Before Razor's devils could execute their synchronized advance, Naruto slammed his thumbs together, crossing his fingers into an ancient, familiar cross sign. Shadow Clone Jutsu. With a violent poof, a massive cloud of dense white smoke exploded across the entire width of the gorge. When it cleared, 20 identical versions of Naruto stood shoulder to shoulder, their bright orange jackets stark against the black obsidian stone. Razor's eyebrows shot up. Materialization? No, there's no trace of conjured nen strings attaching them. Each one possesses an identical, independent physical mass. "Go!" the real Naruto yelled. The horde of clones charged headfirst into the line of nen beasts, intentionally turning the organized tactical formation into an absolute brawl. Clones were getting popped left and right into bursts of smoke by massive, aura-infused punches, but they were doing exactly what Naruto intended, pinning Razor's devils in place and forcing the master emitter to focus his attention everywhere at once. "Killua, now!" Gon shouted. Killua didn't waste the opening. He activated his internalized electricity once more, a brilliant white flash of Godspeed transforming him into a silver streak that cut straight through the center lane. He moved so fast the air cracked behind him, his palms striking the remaining devils in his path with high-voltage paralysis to keep them from reinforcing their creator. Directly behind the silver streak came the hammer. Gon sprinted at absolute full velocity, his right fist pulled back. In his mind, the image of the water balloon and the thick rubber ball fused perfectly. The gold aura around his knuckles wasn't just spinning, it was rotating so fast it looked like a solid, glowing sphere of frictionless metal. Razor saw the incoming strike and planted his feet, his right hand gathering a hyper-dense barrier of Ken to block the assault head-on. Gon reached the inner perimeter, jumped, and threw the entire weight of his body into the punch. Jan Ken Rock. Crash. The collision of Gon's hyper-compressed, spinning enhancer strike against Razor's absolute defense created a localized shockwave that literally ripped the top layer of obsidian stone right off the valley floor. The internal kinetic rotation of the punch acted like a massive drill, grinding violently against Razor's crimson barrier with a high-pitched, metallic shriek. Razor's boots skidded backward an inch, then two, his teeth gritting as he felt the sheer, unconventional physics of the rotational force trying to shred his defensive aura from the inside out. "Not bad, kid," Razor roared over the wind, his eyes flashing with genuine exhilaration as he prepared to release a counter-emission blast right into Gon's chest. "I'm not done yet," Gon screamed. From right above them, the real Naruto dropped out of the sky, having used his clones as a stepping stone. His glitched binder was wide open in his left hand, the slot 000 glowing a fierce, volatile violet as it locked onto the massive reservoir of Nen Razor was preparing to detonate. Like the lady said, Naruto grinned wildly, his right hand already forming a wind vortex barrier to anchor the blow. "We're recycling this entire game, believe it." The collision point became a blinding event horizon. Gon's hyper-compressed, spinning Jajanken continued to drill relentlessly into Razor's red defensive barrier, emitting a high-pitched scream that cracked the surrounding obsidian bedrock. Directly above them, Naruto's glitched binder hummed in a violent crescendo, its out-of-bounds registry violently pulling at the loose threads of the Game Master's aura. To complete the circuit, Killua flashed into the blind spot, discharging a massive, high-frequency electric field that ionized the localized atmosphere. The three entirely separate energetic systems, Nen, Chakra, and the glitching digital code of Greed Island, were grinding against each other, creating an unstable, localized vortex. Crack, crack, crack. The black obsidian ground beneath their feet didn't just split, it began to dissolve into pixelated, flickering fragments of red and yellow error code. Deep, booming sirens, the system alerts of the game itself, began to echo out of the thin air, warning of a catastrophic structural collapse of the northern sector. Razor looked down at the dissolving ground, then up at Naruto's glitched binder, and finally into Gon's unyielding, burning eyes. The sheer kinetic and spatial pressure was starting to warp the boundary line of the island's geometry. If this went on for another 3 seconds, the entire volcanic range would vanish into a corrupted data void. With a sudden, booming laugh that cut right through the roaring wind, Razor completely deactivated his offensive aura, shifting his mass fluidly backward. "Time out," Razor shouted, raising both hands in a universal signal to halt. "Whoa," Naruto yelled, violently twisting his body midair to redirect his wind barrier away from the center. He slammed hard into the dirt, rolling to a stop and quickly closing his glitched book to cut off the siphon. Gon, sensing the sudden drop in resistance, pulled his fist back at the absolute last microsecond, his chest heaving as the golden, spinning vortex around his knuckles slowly dissolved back into his skin. Killua bounded backward, his silver hair losing its electric sheen as his Godspeed mode turned off with a quiet sigh of escaping steam. The sirens faded, the pixelated errors on the floor slowly stitched themselves back into solid black stone. The valley fell utterly quiet, save for the heavy breathing of the three boys. Razor stood a few yards away, brushing a layer of volcanic ash off his sleeveless tunic. His massive Nen beasts vanished back into his shadow, leaving only the Game Master himself. He looked at the cracked, smoking arena, then looked at the three boys, a grin of profound respect crossing his face. All right, I yield," Razor said, raising his hands higher. "If we keep going, the system won't be able to handle the strain. You three aren't just playing the game anymore, you're literally breaking the engine." "Man, what a total drag," Naruto groaned, flopping flat onto his back against the cool stone, his shoulders completely slouching as he stared up at the sky. "You tell us to fight for our lives, and then you call a timeout right when things are getting good. Troublesome." Killua let out a sharp chuckle, wiping a streak of sweat from his forehead. "Hey, you're the one who told us to survive you. And you did," Razor said, walking forward. The glowing red tattoos on his arms dimmed down to a normal shade. He reached into his pocket and pulled out 2 pristine, shimmering cards that radiated an absolute, heavy presence. One card bore the number 000, and the other bore 001. The final, missing pieces of the master registry. "Jing told me that one day, his son would come here with a crew capable of doing the impossible," Razor said, tossing the cards lightly across the gap. Gon caught them seamlessly, his eyes shining like twin stars as he looked down at the legendary rewards. "I just didn't expect you to bring a walking systemic anomaly and an assassin who moves like lightning to help you do it." Gon gripped the cards tightly against his chest, a massive, brilliant smile breaking across his face. Thank you, Razor. Naruto sat up, resting his elbows on his knees, a soft, proud smile matching Gon's. Told ya, believe it. The pervy sage's lessons, combined with a little teamwork, can break through absolutely anything. Biscuit stepped out from the shadows of the gorge, her usual strict demeanor entirely gone, replaced by a quiet, rare look of absolute satisfaction. She crossed her arms, looking from Razor to the three boys. Well, Game Master, Biscuit said, her voice smooth. It seems your little playground couldn't quite contain them. Clearly, Razor laughed, rubbing the back of his neck as he looked at the massive craters and the lingering scorch marks on the obsidian floor. I'll have to spend the next 3 days manually recalibrating the boundary lines for this entire sector before Elena and Laser notice the data drop. You kids really don't do anything halfway, do you? Hey, if you're gonna do it, go all out. Naruto grinned, finally jumping to his feet and dusting off his orange pants. The heavy, lazy Shikamaru vibe had fully cleared, replaced by his usual restless energy. Besides, we've got a game to clear and a ton of food to eat. Winning makes me starving, believe it. You're always starving, Kahlua scoffed, though the faint, relaxed smile on his face didn't fade. He walked over to Gon, looking down at the 2 shimmering master cards held tightly in his friend's hands. Well, Gon, that's it. Slots 000 and 001. The binder's complete. Gon looked at the glowing cards, his fingers trembling slightly. The journey that had started with a rusty fishing rod on Whale Island, leading through the grueling hunter exam, the terrifying heights of Heaven's Arena, and the digital maze of Greed Island, had finally reached its peak. Yeah, Gon whispered, a bright, tearful smile breaking across his face. We actually did it. Suddenly, a massive, island-wide chime echoed from the heavens above. The sky itself seemed to ripple with golden light as a booming, automated announcement resonated through every player's binder across the entire map. Attention all players. The Master Registry has been completed. The final quiz and clearance ceremony will commence in Macedora Central Square in exactly 3 hours. All card restrictions are now lifted. Whoa, it's really happening, Naruto said, looking up at the flashing sky. The whole island is going wild. We need to move, Kahlua said, his eyes sharpening as his tactical instincts kicked back in. The moment the rest of the players realize the game is ending, the square is going to be packed. We need to claim our prize before anyone tries anything stupid. Let them try, Biscuit Basic dismissed with a terrifyingly sweet smile, cracking her knuckles with a sound like snapping wood. I'd love to see who has the nerve to challenge us after what we just did to the volcanic range. Right. Gon cheered, slamming his fists together. He looked back at Naruto and Kahlua, his eyes shining with profound gratitude. Let's go finish this together. Macedora's central square was an absolute sea of noise and color. Hundreds of players had flooded the town, their binders out, talking over each other in a frantic mix of awe, jealousy, and pure shock. In the center of the plaza, a massive, glowing golden platform had materialized, shimmering with a high-density Nen barrier that kept the crowd at bay. The moment Gon, Kahlua, Naruto, and Biscuit walked into the square, a sudden hush rippled through the crowd. Word of the devastating explosion in the northern volcanic range and the defeat of Genthru's faction had spread like wildfire. The crowd parted seamlessly, giving the 4 of us a wide, respectful berth as we approached the golden platform. Man, look at all these people, Naruto muttered, his shoulders drooping into a slight slouch. He rubbed the back of his neck, letting out a small sigh. Walking through a crowd this big is such a pain. Let's just get this quiz over with. Don't let your guard down, Kahlua murmured, his sharp eyes scanning the faces in the crowd. The system quiz tests absolute knowledge of the game's mechanics and card history. It's designed to ensure whoever completes the registry didn't just steal the cards at the last second without understanding the world. As Gon stepped onto the platform, his complete binder materialized in the air before him. The golden light flared, and a massive, floating interface appeared, projecting the final, high-speed system quiz directly into his mind. Because Gon had meticulously studied, explored, and genuinely lived every inch of Greed Island, and with Killua's analytical genius whispering structural answers from the side, the test was a total blowout. Gon's fingers blurred across the glowing holographic inputs, answering all 100 complex questions in record time. Ping! A brilliant, resonant chime echoed across the entire island. The golden barrier dissolved, and the massive floating screen changed, displaying 3 empty, shimmering velvet slots labeled Real-World Materialization Protocol. Congratulations, Player Gon, a serene, automated voice echoed from the sky. You have cleared Greed Island. As your reward, you may choose any 3 cards from your completed binder to materialize and carry with you into the outside world. Gon turned back to Naruto and Killua, his face bright with emotion. He didn't look at the cards for himself. He looked at his friends. We get 3, Gon said softly. 1 for each of us. We earned this together. Are you sure, Gon? Naruto asked, his lazy posture vanishing as he gave the boy a warm, genuine look. This was your journey to find your dad. Finding Jing is my goal, but I wouldn't be standing here without you guys, Gon said firmly. He looked down at the binder, his fingers moving with absolute certainty. For the first slot, he selected Paladin's Necklace, a card capable of purging any curse or malicious Nen effect, a vital tool for whatever dangers lay ahead. For the second slot, Killua stepped up and nodded, selecting Accompany. Combined with a clever trick utilizing the card's hidden tracking parameters, it would allow them to fly directly to any player they had previously met on the island, including the elusive creator, Nig, Jing. Then, Gon looked at Naruto. What about you, Naruto? What do you want to take back? Naruto smiled, but instead of reaching for a rare item, he pulled out his glitched binder. The slot 000 was pulsing a faint, warm golden light, fully synced to his own internal energy core. He reached into the free slots of Gon's binder and pulled out a card that most high-level players ignored. Memory Helmet. A card that allowed a person to perfectly store and share their absolute, unfiltered memories with another. I want this one, Naruto said softly, a deeply nostalgic look in his blue eyes. If I ever find a way back home, I want to show my friends the world I saw here. And if I stay, I want to remember every single bit of the training we did together. Gon smiled brightly, sliding the third card into the interface. The machine let out a deep, harmonious hum. The 3 chosen cards crystallized into solid, tangible physical items, dropping lightly into Gon's outstretched hands. The remaining holographic screens slowly dissolved into a shower of harmless golden sparkles, signaling the absolute end of the game. Gon held the materialized, Accompany card tightly between his fingers, his heart hammering against his ribs. The neon signs of Macedora's central square were already beginning to flicker out as the game's core systems wrapped up their final processes. Everyone, hold hands, Gon said, his voice tense with a mixture of raw excitement and nerves. If the name, Nig, on the registry is really an anagram for Jing, this card is going to take us straight to him. Killua gripped Gon's left shoulder, his eyes darting around the dissolving square one last time. Naruto slung a heavy arm over Gon's right shoulder, a confident, slightly mischievous grin breaking through his face. All right, let's go meet this mystery dad of yours. If he's anything like my master, he's probably doing something totally ridiculous right now, believe it. Biscuit stood just off the golden platform, waving a small, surprisingly gentle hand at them. Take care, you 3. Don't forget your daily physical training, or I'll track you down myself. Gon nodded, raised the card high into the air, and shouted the activation command, Accompany on. To Nig, the card burst into a brilliant, blinding sphere of white light, completely enveloping the 3 of us. The physical world of Greed Island instantly vanished, replaced by the crushing sensation of high-speed spatial travel. We were turning into a shooting star, tearing through the atmospheric boundaries of the game's hidden geographical location and hurtling across the open ocean at Mach speeds. But inside the streaming white light, Naruto's glitched binder suddenly let out a sharp, erratic zap. The slot 000 code lines began to aggressively pulse, tangling with the spell card's trajectory. The spatial path didn't break, but it violently veered sideways, the digital coordinates warping under the pressure of Naruto's unaligned natural energy. Hey, the tracking line is bending. Killua yelled over the roaring wind, his Godspeed instincts flaring as he felt the sudden, dangerous shift in momentum. Naruto's book is pulling the spell off course. Whoops. Sorry, Naruto shouted back, trying to hold his book shut. It's reacting to the teleportation data. Hold on tight. Gon screamed. The white light suddenly turned an ominous, violent shade of deep purple before shattering entirely. The weight of gravity slammed back into us with brutal force. We tumbled out of the sky, crashing violently through a dense, choking canopy of massive, ancient trees that looked 3 times larger than any forest on Whale Island. We hit the forest floor hard, rolling through thick mud and jagged roots before skidding to a halt. Ouch! Naruto groaned, sitting up and shaking a bunch of giant leaves out of his spiky blonde hair. He slouched forward, letting out a massive, exhausted sigh. Man, what a drag. Every time we travel, it turns into a complete mess. Where are we? Gon asked, pushing himself up and looking around. The atmosphere was completely wrong. The air wasn't just humid, it felt heavy, hostile, and utterly alien. The trees stretched hundreds of feet into a darkened sky, their bark weeping a thick, glowing blue sap. But it was the ambient aura that made my skin crawl. The entire forest was thrumming with a predatory, savage pressure that made the dangerous beasts of Greed Island look like house pets. Killua sprang to his feet, his hands instantly stiffening into sharp assassin claws as his eyes darted into the dark undergrowth. This isn't where Jing is. Gone. The glitch hijacked the destination. We're nowhere near the civilized world. From the shadows of the massive roots ahead, a low, guttural growl vibrated through the earth. A pair of glowing, crimson eyes, unfathomably large and filled with a cold, intelligent malice, locked onto the 3 of us. We hadn't landed next to Gon's father. We had just broken the boundary rules entirely, landing straight in the untamed, hyper-lethal wilderness of the Dark Continent. Don't move, Killua hissed, his eyes locked onto the massive crimson eyes shifting behind the glowing blue roots. He pulled his hunter phone out of his pocket, but the screen was completely dead, no signal, no satellite link, not even the background emergency ping. My phone's completely out. The map software isn't even registering a geographical hemisphere. We're off the charts. Tisk. Figures, Naruto muttered. He rolled his neck, his shoulders drooping into a classic lazy slouch as he looked up at the towering, alien canopy. A completely undocumented zone filled with giant monsters. Seriously, what a total drag. The growling intensified, and the earth shook as the creature began to step out from the shadows. Its form was nightmarish, a sprawling, multi-limbed hybrid of a predatory feline and a segmented insect, its carapace huming with a raw, chaotic life-cycle energy that felt completely unbound by the laws of Nen. We need data, Killua said, his knuckles twitching as a faint spark of internal lightning rippled down his arm. We don't know its speed, its durability, or if its breath is toxic. Don't engage head-on yet. Got it. I'll send in the vanguard, Naruto said, his eyes sharpening as he snapped out of his slouch. He brought his hands together into the familiar cross-seal. Shadow clone jutsu. With a massive, deafening poof, a thick wall of white smoke filled the damp clearing. Out of the haze burst 30 identical Narutos, all grinning wildly as they lunged straight toward the massive root system. All right, ugly, let's see what you've got. The clones yelled in unison. The beast didn't even flinch. With a speed that defied its massive size, its front scythe-like limbs swept through the air. The motion was so fast it created a localized sonic boom, tearing a vacuum through the humid air. Pop, 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 pop. In less than a second, 15 clones were instantly vaporized into puffs of smoke. The sheer kinetic shockwave alone popped another 5 that were just getting close. Whoa, Gon gasped, his boots sliding back into a defensive stance. It didn't even use aura. That's just raw physical power. Killua, what do you see? The real Naruto asked, standing perfectly still as he analyzed the feedback from his popped clones. Killua's eyes were darting rapidly, his assassin training allowing him to break down the beast's movements frame by frame. Its reaction time is under 5 milliseconds. The shell is high-density chitin, probably harder than refined obsidian. But look at the joints. Whenever it strikes, the glowing blue sap from the trees rubs off on its underbelly, making the segments flex. So the sap is a lubricant for its armor. Naruto smirked, his fingers tightening as his glitched binder flared to life on his wrist. The slot 000 code lines rapidly spinning as they mapped the local environment's chaotic energy. Which means if we gum up the joints, it slows down. Exactly, Killua nodded, a dangerous, confident grin returning to his face as he tapped Naruto's shoulder. I can use my lightning to flash fry the sap on its skin, turning it into a solid, brittle crust. Once it's locked up, Gon closes the gap. I'm ready, Gon shouted, his right fist already starting to gather that tight, hyper-compressed golden rotation. Naruto slung his arms behind his head for a brief split second, letting out one last lazy sigh. Man, executing a perfect strategy right after a rough landing is exhausting. Let's hurry up and bag this thing, believe it. The remaining 10 clones didn't hesitate. They lunged outward, acting as a living shield to draw the monster's attention away from the real threat. The beast's razor-sharp mandibles snapped, clicking violently as it ripped through the distractions in a flurry of white smoke. Now, Killua, Naruto shouted. Killua didn't answer with words. He simply disappeared. A brilliant, blinding streak of silver-blue electricity cut through the dim, humid air of the alien jungle. Driven by God's speed, Killua bypassed the creature's frontal blind spot entirely, vaulting off a massive, weeping root. As he soared over the beast's segmented back, he extended both hands, discharging a high-frequency, continuous current of pure lightning directly into the creature's joints. Zeet! The massive voltage hit the thick, glowing blue sap coating the beast's underbelly. Just as Killua predicted, the extreme thermal and electrical reaction caused the organic lubricant to instantly flash fry. The fluid solidified into a dense, brittle, concrete-like crust within microseconds. The monster let out a deafening, metallic screech as it tried to swing its scythe-like front limb. The joint seized completely, the hardened sap locking its front leg in midair. It staggered, its balance violently thrown off as it toppled sideways toward the mud. Gone. It's wide open, Killua yelled, flipping backward off the creature's carapace and landing cleanly on a high branch. Right. Gon vaulted forward, his feet tearing up chunks of moss and earth as he closed the distance. His right fist was already pulled back to his hip, the golden aura around his knuckles compressed into a flawless, spinning sphere of pure kinetic energy. The water balloon rotation was so violently fast it created a vacuum around his arm, pulling in the loose leaves and dust. He didn't need to stand still. He didn't need a countdown. He struck with full momentum, driving his fist straight into the vulnerable, unarmored soft tissue just beneath the creature's seized shoulder joint. Jan Ken rock. Boom. The impact was cataclysmic. The internal, drilling friction of the compressed Jajunkin tore right through the beast's flesh, sending a massive, concussive shockwave straight through its internal organs. The sheer force lifted the multi-ton predator entirely off the ground before slamming it back down into the mud, completely unconscious, its crimson eyes fading into a dull, inert gray. Gon landed nimbly on his feet, letting out a sharp breath as the golden aura vanished back into his skin. He wiped a splatter of blue sap from his cheek, grinning up at the trees. We got it, Killua, your calculation was perfect. Hey, don't forget who provided the distraction, Naruto said, strolling up lazily with his hands tucked right back into his orange pockets. He slouched down, looking over the massive, defeated creature with a slow, half-lidded blink. Man, fighting things on this continent is going to take way too much effort. Everything out here has too many legs. What a drag. Get used to it, Killua said, dropping down from the branch and joining them. He looked around the darkening, hostile forest, his expression turning deadly serious. That was just one scout. Look up. Naruto and Gon followed his gaze. High above the ancient, 100-foot canopy, the strange, violet sky was filled with thousands of massive, shifting silhouettes. The Dark Continent wasn't just a new map, it was an entire world of unbound survival. Well, Naruto grinned, his lazy slouch vanishing as a familiar, stubborn spark returned to his blue eyes. He reached down, patting his glitched binder as it hummed against his hip. Jing's friends said we had to survive this place to find the real answers. Let's get moving, believe it. They kept their movement tight, stepping deeper into the ancient, alien undergrowth. Naruto led the way, his senses tuned to the low hum of the terrain while Gon and Killua flanked him, their eyes sweeping the canopy. Hey, look at the book, Gon said, pointing toward Naruto's waist. Naruto unclipped the glitched binder. The leather was warm to the touch, and the neon yellow and blue script across, slot 000, had stopped its chaotic flickering. Instead, the code lines had settled into a steady, crystalline pattern that projected a tiny, three-dimensional compass needle of pure golden light directly into the air above the page. The needle didn't point toward the north or south of this strange continent. It was locked onto a specific, distant energy signature deep within the dark interior of the jungle. It's tracking something, Killua observed, leaning over Naruto's shoulder to study the golden projection. The spell data from the accompany card didn't just break when we crashed. Your binder siphoned the coordinates and anchored onto the nearest heavy Nen reservoir on this landmass. If we follow that needle, we find whatever, or whoever, is putting out that signal. Could it be Jing? Gon asked, his voice lifting with a sudden spike of hope. Maybe, Naruto said, his voice dropping into that slow, deadpan Shikamaru drawl as he scratched the back of his head. Or it's something incredibly massive that wants to eat us. Seriously, walking straight into a mystery trap on an unknown continent, what a total drag. Well, standing around here is a worse option, Killua countered, nudging Naruto's shoulder. Those silhouettes in the sky are starting to circle lower. We move now, or we become bird food. Right, let's step on it, Naruto sighed, snapping the book shut and slipping into a smooth, low-profile jog. They moved like ghosts through the massive root systems, clearing miles of the dense, blue-sapped jungle in total silence. The deeper they went, the more the forest changed. The towering trees began to give way to colossal, ruined structures of weathered white stone that looked like the remnants of a giant civilization from thousands of years ago, completely swallowed by the ancient flora. The golden needle on Naruto's book pulsed faster, the light turning sharp and vibrant. Suddenly, Naruto skidded to a halt behind the pillar of a massive cracked archway. He raised a hand, signaling the boys to drop. Gon and Killua instantly crouched into the thick ferns, vanishing from sight. Through the gap in the stones ahead, the jungle opened up into a massive, circular amphitheater. Sitting right in the center of the ruins, casually roasting a large, alien fish over a small campfire, was a man in a frayed cloak. He had a scruffy beard, a messy shock of black hair, and an old, battered hunter's pack resting against a stone block next to him. The man didn't look up from the fire, but a faint, knowing smirk touched his lips. You took the scenic route, the man said, his voice carrying clearly across the quiet ruins. I expected you 3 hours ago. Gon's breath caught in his throat. He stared at the man's silhouette, his eyes widening in absolute shock as the realization hit him like a physical blow. It was the face from the old cassette tape. The face from the faded photographs. Jing Freesi SS. Gon stepped out from the shadow of the stone archway, his boots crunching softly on the ancient, weathered masonry. Every ounce of his usual hyperactive energy seemed to freeze, replaced by a profound, heavy stillness. He walked slowly toward the campfire, his eyes locked onto the man turning the wooden spit. Killua and Naruto remained tucked back in the ferns, their bodies coiled like springs. Naruto didn't slouch. His hand rested firmly on the hilt of his weapon pouch, his blue eyes scanning the dark perimeter of the amphitheater where the glowing blue sap of the trees cast long, eerie shadows. Killua's fingers twitched with a faint, silent hum of electricity, his assassin instincts tracking the terrifying layout of the ruins. Jing didn't stand up. He took the fish off the fire, blew on it, and finally turned his head to look at the boy approaching him. You got taller, Jing said casually, as if they were meeting at a local tavern rather than the most lethal wilderness in the world. And you brought company. Gon stopped 10 feet away. He didn't yell. He didn't cry. He just looked at his father, his chest rising and falling with steady breaths. You made the game incredibly hard to clear, Jing. If it was easy, it wouldn't have been worth your time, Jing replied, taking a bite of the fish. He looked past Gon's shoulder, his sharp eyes locking directly onto the ferns where the other two were hiding. You can come out, kids. If the local wildlife wanted to ambush us, they would have done it before you crossed the perimeter. I've been keeping the alpha predators in this sector quiet for a week. Naruto and Killua stepped out of the brush, their movements fluid and guarded. Naruto let out a long, loud sigh, his shoulders instantly dropping back into his signature lazy slouch. Man, you're really his dad, huh? The attitude is exactly the same. What a total drag. Jing chuckled, his eyes lingering on the glitched binder hanging from Naruto's belt, which was still pulsing with a steady, golden light. So you're the systemic anomaly that rewrote my game's boundary lines. Elena texted me through the master portal before the grid went down. Said someone brought an energy source that doesn't belong to this world's physics. We didn't mean to break your game, Killua said coldly, stepping up beside Gon. The accompany card glitched out because of Naruto's presence and dropped us here. We were supposed to find you in the civilized world. The civilized world is boring, Jing said, finally standing up and dusting off his frayed cloak. He looked at Gon, his expression softening just a fraction, showing the rough, unpolished pride of a man who lived on the edge of the unknown. You cleared Greed Island, Gon. You solved the puzzles, beat the bomber, and found the hidden horizon. You earned the right to face the real world. So, what's your next move? Gon looked at Naruto, then at Killua, a bright, unyielding grin breaking through his serious expression. He slammed his fists together, the golden aura of his Jajunkan sparking briefly around his knuckles. We're going to explore this place with you, Gon said fiercely. And then, we're going to show you exactly how strong we got. Jing stared at Gon for a long, silent moment, the crackle of the campfire the only sound filling the ruined amphitheater. The casual, proud smirk vanished from his face, replaced by a hard, unyielding grimace. He tossed the wooden spit into the flames and shook his head. No, Jing said flatly. You're going back. Gon's jaw tightened, his arms dropping to his sides. What? But we cleared the game. We tracked you all the way here. We just beat a monster That was a juvenile scout, Jing cut him off, his voice dropping into a low, deadly serious register that carried the absolute weight of a triple-star hunter. You three think because you optimized your nen and broke a few digital boundaries, you're ready for this place? Look around you. Jing gestured broadly to the towering, alien canopy and the massive stone ruins fading into the dark. The Dark Continent isn't a playground for talented kids. The things out here don't care about your combat logic or your tactical synchronization. One drop of the wrong water will liquefy your insides. One scratch from a microscopic parasite will drive your mind into a permanent nightmare loop. You don't clear this place with a high score. You survive it by knowing exactly when to run, and right now, you don't even know what you're running from. Killua stepped forward, his eyes narrowing to ice-cold slits. We aren't normal kids, old man. We just rewrote the environment of your volcanic range. Naruto's energy system. Naruto's energy system is the only reason you aren't already dead, Jing snapped, looking directly at Naruto, who was listening intently, his usual lazy slouch entirely gone. His presence is masking your biological signatures from the macro predators in this valley. But the moment you step out of this sector, the continent will adapt to him. It will hunt him specifically to consume that new energy. Jing turned his full attention back to Gon, his expression solid as granite. I left Greed Island as a test to see if you had the drive to become a real hunter. You passed, but my job out here isn't to babysit a squad of rookies, no matter how gifted you are. I'm refusing. You're taking the next extraction window back to the safe zone. The tension in the ruins became suffocating. Gon stood his ground, his fists trembling slightly as he stared into his father's eyes, refusing to back down from the absolute wall of Jing's refusal. Gon didn't take a step back. He planted his boots deep into the ancient dirt, his eyes blazing with a fierce, unyielding light. The golden aura of his Jajanken didn't just spark, it erupted, coating his entire body in a thick, vibrating shroud of Ken. Then let us prove it, Gon said, his voice ringing like struck metal across the ruins. One hit, Jing. You don't have to babysit us. Just trade one blow with me head on. If I can't take your strike, or if you can block mine without moving an inch, we'll take the extraction window back. But if I stand my ground, you let us walk the path. Killua's breath caught. He's serious, the assassin thought, his knuckles instantly tightening as his internal lightning hummed. He knew better than to try and stop Gon when his mind was set like this. Naruto let out a slow, sharp breath, his hands coming out of his pockets. The lazy, troublesome slouch vanished entirely, replaced by the grim, focused expression of a ninja who recognized a defining moment. He stepped back slightly, giving them room, but his glitched binder pulsed a steady, protective field of golden chakra to ensure the surrounding environment didn't collapse under the incoming pressure. Jing looked at his son, his eyes narrowing. The cold, immovable wall of his expression didn't soften, but a dangerous, low current of crimson nen began to seep out from beneath his boots. The sheer presence of it made the campfire flames flatten against the dirt. One blow, Jing repeated, his voice quiet, almost flat. Fine, but I won't hold back to save your feelings, Gon. If your defense isn't absolute, this strike will break every bone in your upper body. Jing didn't drop into a complex martial stance. He simply pulled his right fist back to his hip, his knees bending a fraction of an inch. The crimson nen rolling off him suddenly vanished, entirely sucked into his knuckles. It was a flawless execution of Ko, compressing 100% of his terrifying aura into a single, localized point. The air around his fist began to distort, warping into a dark, pressurized vacuum. Gon dropped low, his center of gravity shifting perfectly. In his mind, the images of the water balloon, the thick rubber ball, and the shattered basalt wall of the volcanic range fused into a single, flawless concept. He pulled his right arm back. The golden aura around his fist didn't just rotate, it hyper-compressed, spinning so fast it turned into a tiny, blindingly white core of kinetic friction. Jan, Gon whispered, the ground beneath his feet cracking. Ken, the stone structures of the amphitheater groaned as the atmospheric pressure plummeted. Jing didn't wait. He lunged forward, crossing the 10-foot gap in a microsecond, his fist tracing a straight, lethal line through the air. Rock! Gon screamed, throwing the entire weight of his soul, his training, and his journey into the counter-strike. Crash! The collision of the two fists didn't make a standard explosive sound. It was a deafening, metallic tear that split the vacuum of the ruins. A massive, hemispherical shockwave erupted from the point of impact, violently blasting the campfire into absolute nothingness and tearing a 5-foot trench into the ancient stone floor beneath them. Naruto instantly raised his left hand, forming a massive wind-style barrier to anchor himself and Killua as the concussive wind threatened to throw them into the stone pillars. For 3 agonizing seconds, the two forces ground against each other. Gon's white-hot, spinning rotation drilled relentlessly into Jing's solid, dense crimson wall. Gon's teeth gritted, blood instantly trickling from his nose as the sheer, terrifying weight of his father's aura pushed against his limits. His boots skidded backward, 1 inch, 2 inches, but he refused to let his knees buckle. He roared, forcing the rotation of his Jajanken to spin even faster, converting the friction into raw, forward momentum. With a sudden, sharp snap, the conflicting energies detonated, blowing both fighters apart. Jing fluidly skidded backward, his boots tracing 2 clean lines in the dirt before he came to a stop, his right sleeve entirely shredded from the elbow down by the leftover kinetic rotation. Gon tumbled through the air, flipping twice before landing hard on his feet. He staggered, his breath coming in ragged, painful gasps, his right arm shaking violently and bruised dark purple. But the bone was intact. He stood tall, wiping the blood from his face, his eyes still burning as he locked them onto his father.